Hey, how's everyone going? Excalibur here today, guys. In today's video, we're going to be discussing all the shop towers that you guys should buy and all of the shop towers that you should avoid when you're leveling up. So let's get right into it. Okay, so starting off with this video, guys, I'm going to break it down how we're going to be talking about these towers before we actually get into it. So I've actually cut up these towers into little categories from like what I would give the level recommendations for easy, medium, hard, and chaos. So I will be cutting this up from levels 0 to 5, 5 to 15, 15 to 22, and then 22 and onwards. These represent easy, medium, hard, and chaos. So without further ado, let's get straight into the towers. Alright guys, so the towers that you should be looking to buy from levels 0 to 5, or 1 to 5 I should say, are Bubble Tower, Campfire, and Glue Gun. And the towers that you should probably avoid buying are Spike Trap, Sea Battery, and Bucket, and we'll go into why those are as they are right now. Okay guys, so starting off with Bubble Tower, it's a damage dealing tower, and the good things about this is that it has high damage, it has good range, and it has lead sight at tier 5. So that means it can help out with the lead cubes. It's a pretty cheap tower, and it's going to be a big upgrade from your light turret and your plasma tower. The only downside to this tower is that it doesn't have very early lead sight like the plasma tower does, but you can solo easy mode with just this tower, so it's something you really do want to get your hands on. Okay guys, so with Campfire, this is a support tower. It provides shadow sight for your towers, makes the upgrades for them cheaper, and also heals your map health. So if you've leaked a cube and you have a Campfire down at level 4 or 5, this tower will heal your map health back. The only downside to this tower is that it's a little expensive to get up, so the more that you spend on getting the Campfires up, the less money you're going to have for actual defense, since it doesn't do any damage. But yeah, and for Glue Gun, the good things about this tower is pretty much all the only good thing I can say about this is that it slows down cubes. It's pretty cheap too, but slowing down cubes is going to be really helpful for you because it means that the cubes stay in the range of your other towers for a lot longer, which means they can do more damage. The downsides to this tower is that it doesn't do that much damage really, but I mean that's not too bad when you consider the fact that it can slow cubes down, so definitely I recommend getting this tower as well. Okay, so moving on to the towers that you guys should avoid. Sea Battery I would avoid getting just because it's a water tower, so a lot of the maps in easy and medium, the water isn't very close to the track and it doesn't really provide much coverage. So Sea Battery I would avoid getting, and I would definitely get Bubble Tower instead. Moving on to Bucket. Bucket it's kind of like a tower where you place it and it gives a very small chance to give gold, and it's really, that's all there is to it. It doesn't do any damage, it doesn't support your towers in any way, and the chance to get gold from it is just so small, especially for a lower level player. You're not going to get a golden bucket very easily from this tower, so I would definitely avoid getting this. Don't waste your gold. And for Spike Trap guys, good things about the Spike Trap is you place them and it does instant damage to the cubes. It's pretty cheap, pretty fast to place, but the only downside is you don't actually get money back when you spike your cubes, so it actually ends up being a waste of money a lot of the time, and instead you could probably have placed on a tower to kill those cubes. So yeah, that's the towers you should avoid and you should buy for levels 0 to 5. Let's move on to 5 to 15. Alright guys, so a lot to cover in the 5 to 15 level range. This is what I would recommend for medium mode, but let's get right into it. So the towers I would recommend you guys buy are Factory, Shocker, Mortar, Mounted Minigun, Battleship, and Submarine. And the towers that I would avoid are Mounted Flamethrower, Heavy Turret, Defab, Gold Mine, Raft, and Missile Launcher. We'll go into why you should avoid or buy these towers now. Another tower that is really good that I recommend you getting, guys, is Plantation, and we will go over why you should get all of these towers in just a moment. Okay, so starting off with Factory. Factory is an economy based tower, and it's going to be essential for getting really high waves in easy and medium, a lot easier. So the Factory gives cash, as the economy tower states, and it's also a player limit tower, which means everyone that has Factory can place their own little group of them. So obviously it's really good for playing in a team. No one has to worry about player limit, or sorry, server limits for these things. so everybody gets their own. I couldn't really come up with a downside to these towers, really. They're just really good and going to be helping you guys so much, so definitely get your hands on Factory. Moving on to Shocker, I also grouped Shocker with Mortar as well because they kind of do the same role. These two are both damage dealing towers, but they are also splash towers, so they do damage to groups of cubes. They're really good against spam, and they're pretty cheap to get up as well. The only downside to these two towers is they're not very good against bosses, so I wouldn't rely on them. But if you've got a lot of spam coming in and early game, definitely get your hands on Shocker or Mortar. Alright guys, moving on to Mounted Minigun. This is another damage dealing tower. Mounted Minigun has very high damage. It has Shadow Sight at level 2, has Lead Sight at level 3. It has pretty good range. It's quite cheap to upgrade as well. And again, I couldn't really come up with anything wrong with this tower. It's all around a really good damage dealing tower for you guys to use, especially in the easy medium game modes. We sometimes use it in chaos as well. So 100%, this is one of the towers that you definitely want to buy in the shop. Next up is Battleship, which is another damage dealing tower. This one is actually a water placement tower. The good thing about Battleship is it has high damage, it has Shadow and Lead Sight. The only downside is to this tower that it's quite small range, so same with the sea battery, it's not really many great water placements on some of the maps, so this could let you down. It won't have very good coverage, but it still does really good damage. So if you're playing on a map like Waterfall, for example, I would definitely recommend using Battleship, as the damage it will provide will be really good. Next up is Submarine. Submarine is it's a really good tower that you guys should get your hands on. It has whole map range when you get it to level 2 or 3, I believe. Yep. So it covers pretty much the entire map. It provides splash damage. It has Shadow and Lead Sight. It's pretty good against bosses as well. The only downside to this tower is that it doesn't deal well with fast cubes, so make sure you bring Mounted Mini or something as well to pair up against this. So again guys, Plantation is one of those towers that you want to get. It's an economy tower and it gives money to everybody in the map. So I'd recommend maybe one player buying this and then they can work on plantations while other people are doing defense and farming. It's a really good tower. It will honestly benefit you throughout the entire game. Everyone still uses it now in chaos and things, so definitely get your hands on this tower as early as you can. Alright guys, so let's move on to the towers that you should avoid, starting with Mounted Flame. Mounted Flame is again another damage dealing tower. It provides damage over time when it hits cubes. It has pretty decent fire rate, I would say, but it doesn't provide that much damage. It's not very good against bosses, it's not very good against spam. The only time you'd really use this is early game, so I wouldn't recommend buying it. The next tower I would avoid is Heavy Turret. While Heavy Turret is kind of good, it gets like decent damage, I would say. The amount of money that you spend on it, it's quite expensive for the damage that you get, so I would not recommend getting Heavy Turret. The next tower is Gold Mine. So the positives about this tower is that it gives you gold at the end of every wave. The biggest downside to this is, especially if you're a lower level player, this will take a long time to pay itself back. So if you were to spend the 5,005 gold that it costs, especially if you're a lower level player, that will take you a very long time to get it back. So I would recommend getting this later, once you start playing hard in chaos, but just for now I would avoid getting this tower. Another tower you guys will want to avoid is the Raft. The Raft allows you to place land towers on water once you place it down, but that's pretty much all it does. It doesn't have many other uses, and a lot of the maps you have very good land placement anyway. So again, there's not really much point getting this tower early, so definitely avoid this. Alright, so coming up next is Missile Launcher. Again, you want to avoid this tower guys. It's another damage dealing tower. It has splash damage, which is good. It has decent damage. It has Shadow Sight. It has Lead Sight. The downsides to this is the splash damage that it has isn't really good. It doesn't really do that much impact damage for how much you spend, and it's a pretty expensive tower when it comes to placing it in game, so I would avoid getting this, and then save up for the other towers that are on this level category that you should buy. Alright guys, with those out of the way, let's move on to what I recommend for hard mode. So this is levels 16 to 22. And we'll be discussing what towers you should get and which towers you should avoid. So the towers that I would recommend buying for this level category are Rail Minigun, Oil Rig, Stealth Bomber and Orbital Satellite. And the towers that I would avoid are Railgun, Stars of Uso, and Anti-Cubedefense, and we'll go over that, why you should avoid and buy these towers right now. Okay, so starting off with Rail Minigun. Rail Minigun is again a damage dealing tower. It has fast fire rate, it has good range, it has lead sight at level 1. The only downside to this tower really is that it doesn't have shadow sight, so you will need to use a campfire for it. But it is a very good fast damage dealing tower that can deal with spam, it can deal with bosses. So definitely buy this instead of the railgun, and we'll go over that why in a moment. The next tower that you guys will definitely want to get is Oil Rig. The reason you guys want to get your hands on Oil Rig is because it is an economy tower. Again, it's a player limit tower as well. It provides cash at the end of every wave. It gives a very high cash output, so it pays itself back very fast. And it's also, if you know how to use it, it's very good for temple gain, which we'll go over in a little bit. So definitely buy this, guys. The only downside is that it's quite expensive to get up, like upgrade, but it makes money itself, so it's not that big of an issue. And the next tower I would recommend you guys getting is Stealth Bomber. Stealth Bomber is a splash damage tower. It has very high range, it has good splash damage. It has good impact damage, it's good against bosses, it's good against spam. It's a really good all-round tower. The only downside is it's not very good against fast cubes like the submarine is. So you will need something else, otherwise the Stealth Bomber will get overwhelmed. But again, definitely get this, guys. It has shadow sight, it has lead sight. It's definitely a tower you guys want to get your hands on. And finally, for the towers that you should I recommend you getting is the Orbital Satellite. Orbital Satellite has insane range. It has like entire map coverage. It has very high splash damage. It's very good against spam. It has a very high splash radius. The only downside is it's not very good against bosses because most of its damage is in its splash. So yeah, but this is, again, it's a very good tower against like medium health cubes like purple cubes and, you know, sun cubes. Definitely get your hands on this. Alright guys, so let's go into the towers that you should avoid for this level category, starting off with Railgun. Railgun is very similar to Rail Minigun, so it has lead sight, it has very high range, it has good damage. The only reason I would avoid this tower is because it has a very slow fire rate. So whatever Railgun can do damage wise, Rail Minigun can do it faster and more consistently. So I would definitely avoid getting Railgun and save up for Rail Minigun instead. Okay, next on the list is Stars of Uso. This is a damage dealing tower again. It has very high damage, very fast fire rate. It can hit lead cubes really early as well. The downsides to this tower, however, is that it doesn't have very high range, so it can't cover many corners, and that's really like the biggest factor that makes this tower something you should avoid, just because it doesn't have high range. Its damage is good, but it won't see a lot of the map, especially on big maps. And finally, for this level category, guys, for towers you should avoid is the Anti-Cubedefense. The Anti-Cubedefense is a damage dealing tower that shoots individual missiles. Each missile does impact damage and splash damage. So the ACD overall has good damage, has a little bit of splash, but it's not very good against spam waves. It's got a slow fire rate, it's quite expensive. It's just, there's so many other towers in this level category that I would get instead, especially like the Stealth Bomber, so I would avoid getting ACD and save up for something else instead. Alright guys, and the final level category, which is level 22 and over. This is for chaos mode. There's only 3 towers in this little section, but I'm going to be going into detail whether you should buy or avoid them. So let's get into it. Okay, before I go into the towers, guys, I just want to say that each of these towers, all 3, are definitely something you should buy. There is nothing you should avoid in this level category. I think the biggest question that I get asked is, should I buy Sun Temple or should I buy Tomb first? So let's go into the what makes these towers good and what makes them bad, and we'll discuss it together. Okay, so starting off with the Sun Temple. This, obviously you guys know this, it's like the most popular tower in the game. It has insane damage, insane fire rate, very high range. Collectively it is the highest damage dealing tower in the game. However, it can't hit Sun Cubes, which is very sad, and it needs Temple Gain to max it out. So what I mean by this is you need to feed it towers to get it to be as strong as it can be. And if you don't feed it enough, then it won't have high damage. So that's extra money that you have to spend into getting it. But overall guys, this is, if you're doing hard mode, you don't necessarily need Temple. But if you're doing Chaos mode, 100% I would recommend getting Temple before Tomb. If you have OC and you have Rail Mini and you have Orbital Satellite, then you won't need Tomb. But 100% for Chaos mode, I would recommend getting Temple. For Poseidon's Tomb, guys, again, this is a tower I would recommend you getting as fast as possible. It has very high damage, it has good splash damage as well. It has a kind of fast fire rate. At max it has a fire rate of like 1.5 seconds, so really good. The biggest downside to this tower is that it heals lightning cubes. It's also a water tower, which means you can't place it on certain maps, which kind of sucks. But this is like your main Sun Cube defense, the Poseidon's Tomb. So if you guys are going to be playing hard mode a lot, I would recommend getting Tomb, because you don't really need Temple. If you get 6 max Tombs, you can kind of get carried on hard mode. But if you guys, as I say, if you guys are going for Chaos, I would definitely recommend getting Sun Temple. But it's your choice. Obviously, if you play Chaos and you want to get Tomb, then by all means you do that. That's just my recommendation for you guys. And let's move on to the final tower. Alright guys, so you guessed it, Sun Temple Mark II. This tower, this is definitely the last tower you should get, in my opinion. I would make sure you have Sun Temple, Tomb, OS, Oil Rig. This is obviously a level 50 tower, so this is it boosts other Sun Temples. So it makes them stronger, it gives them more range, it makes them cheaper. But that's all it does, so it doesn't help with anything else. So I would definitely recommend getting this last. I'd make sure you get Sun Temple and Tomb first. Once you've got everything that you want in the shop, definitely recommend getting Sun Temple Mark II. Alright guys, that's all I have for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys have any suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future. And with that, stay awesome, stay kind to each other, and have a lovely day. I will see you in the next Cube Defense video.